We hear my siren going past. Apologies about that. So anyway, welcome to Drafting Diaries. This month we are talking about circular frill. So things similar to this little frill on the mannequin behind me. And we thought this would be a really fun topic because they look really complex. They have a lot of drama, a lot of eye-catching details, but they're actually really simple to do. And you can use them in so many different ways. So they're really fun and really versatile. And before we get started, go on.
I was going to say it's also one of those where we really struggle with the title because we always want to come up with something catchy, and it doesn't sound very exciting, but it's actually a really clever, like drafting philosophy or principles which you can then use in lots of different ways. So we're going to explore some of them, but it's really like, yeah, if you can come up with a better title, do help us.
Yeah, maybe we need a copyright person to help. Okay, so if you have any questions or anything while we're chatting, pop them in the comments or keep them for after. We will have a little Q&A at the end. But before we get stuck into all of the designs that we want to talk about today, thought we'd just start by reintroducing ourselves in case there's anyone new here. So I'm Kate. Hey, I run Project Patterns. You can find me on Instagram at Project Patterns or on my website, www.project-patterns.co.uk. I run online courses teaching people how to make patterns, basically, and I'm a professional pattern cutter, and I just love it, and I want to share my love of pattern cutting with everyone else. And I'm joined by Charlotte.
Hello, I'm Charlotte from the School of Pattern Cutting, and my website is patterncutting.school. Like Kate, I'm a pattern cutter as well, but I'm also I actually come from design, so I always feel a bit like a fraud because I went the dark way first, the pretty way before settling down for the real important stuff, which is pattern cutting. And I love all sorts of things, vintage pattern cutting, but I think like Kate, we both just love it. There's something like fashion is very glitzy, but most of the reality of fashion is actually just factories and emails. But pattern cutting is a bit in the middle, which is where all that glitz and the reality meets, and it's where it really happens. It's like engineering or inventing, isn't it? And once you get it, you can make anything, which is what I love. It's like a real practical skill rather than, dreaming in your head. You actually get to make it.
Yeah. I always tell people I'm the magic wand between sketch and garment.
Yeah, everything stops at you, doesn't it? And a good technician, a good seam machinist.
Yeah, dream team. Okay, so we're talking about circular frills, and we have 3 different designs that we want to talk to you guys about. And you will see that the circular frills are used in slightly different ways in each one, and they get slightly more complex as we move through them. So Charlotte, do you want to kick us off on the first design?
Yes, the first one is like actually a really good way of frills are used. It's white, so I'm just hoping we'll be able to see it all. I'm just sort of never always choose the best ones. But what it is, it's about making a really fitted top, which is asymmetric, and then you're really using that frill or flounce circular pattern to its biggest effect. We're layering and we're adding all that volume, and circles are a really good way to introduce drama, and it's also where you can really play with the body. So because this is a really fitted garment, it's one shoulder that's asymmetric, you move around the body, so it goes around the body and it goes underneath, so you can really learn how that works. And we call this a horizontal frill, which is probably the most common because it really brings out the volume, and you can really be quite gentle, which for a lot of frills where we do a spiral. We were talking about Fibonacci sequence the other day, Kate and I, because that is like the perfect spiral. So you could do it like that, and it could give you another effect. If you do like a half circle, if you do a pure donut, if you do something which moves more or less, you can really work out how to get that frill. But it's quite different from normal flat pattern cutting, because rather than just having your bodies and working from that, we're introducing geometric designs, which means volume works the same as it does in maths. It becomes quite interesting how it reacts around your 3D body. Now, I'm going to say something really practical after I've about it.
I was just going to say, I think what I really like about circular frills like this is that you get the drama, you get the volume, but without any of the bulkiness of something like a gather or a pleat. And the way that they sort of flute is really unique to a circular frill like this. And with a neckline like this, it's asymmetric. You'll find that even though the volume is the same in the frill, so let's say, for example, if you've taken a perfect kind of half circle and made this frill, even if the volume is the same on the frill, the way that it hangs on the body will change depending on the angle of the seam and the position of the seam. So over the shoulder would hang a little bit flat, and then over the bust would kind of go a little bit more out because you've got your bust pushing it out, and under the arm potentially could be a little bit fuller because it hangs directly down the body. So that's something to consider when you're working with circle frills in this way. You might want to actually add a little bit more curve into some areas that might push out or be a little bit flatter, and you might want to reduce some of that curve in the area like the underarm, where your arm's going to crush it anyway, and it's going to naturally create more volume through there.
And I think that's something where, like, because there's lots of sort of quick Pinterest tutorials or Instagram tutorials where it's just like, yeah, you cut out a spiral and then you have this amazing evening dress. But quite often as pattern cutters, it's like you use the principle of circles, but then you actually start applying your knowledge of the body of pattern cutting. So it's like you're retrofitting rather than starting with your bodice block. You actually start with something geometric and then you start applying your knowledge. So it's really good to, but you know, this is where your sort of experience comes in as well and your understanding.
Yeah, and where your draping comes in. I know
Yeah.
how much I love to drape.
We will get Kate one day to drape for us.
So the top that we're speaking about is more of a horizontal frill, right? So that seam that the frill attaches into goes across the body. But our next example is where the seam that it attaches into goes down the body, and you'll see that it creates a completely different look. And you can see it's like this kind of waterfall-y effect. And this is a circular frill as well, but instead of having that volume hanging this way and dropping down, you've got your frill hanging this way. So all the volume that would, if gravity wasn't around, stick out like this, just drops down the body and creates these gorgeous little swishy lines. This is one of my favorite types of ways to add drama to a garment and just have such a simple frill. And you can see in this one that we've got parts of the frill are a little bit wider than others. You can control that by basically making, instead of having your seam that attaches onto the straight seam as like a beautiful smooth curve, if you add corners into that, you can control where those folds will fall and where that volume will kind of react on the body, if that makes sense. So the nice thing about this specific design is that at the top, we've got almost like a double frill. So you can see where kind of from the hem to just below the thigh, that's just one kind of circular piece draping down the body. And then as soon as you go from the thigh to the waist, we have this bit of the frill that folds back on itself, which I think is really clever as well. It just adds that finishing touch.
Yes, I was going to say, this is Kate chose this, so it's very glamorous, contemporary. I also think that way of using a frill vertically works really well, both for sort of contemporary, smart, casual office wear, because if you combine this frill, for example, with a really crisp shirt, and I added one in our Pinterest board. Is our Pinterest board in the description?
It is.
To have a look, there's a really nice black cos top, and that has got that frill, but that it's set in quite a stark, simple button stand. And that's where you, of course, we all have our taste. Kate is the queen of occasion wear. I'm more vintage, and I do love a bit of work wear. But where you can apply with pattern cutting methods to work use and make it crisp, and a cotton would be really beautiful, more understated, and you could sort of have it come off your shoulder and hitting your button stand. Or in a lot of vintage styles, this is used with a pencil skirt for sort of, again, either cocktail but also day wear, because if you did it in a black wool, you could actually have that top here. It's a big statement, but if that circular frill sort of at the top moved on your body, it starts by being out the peplum and then sort of going down the body a bit more and sort of being trapped in that side seam. So you can really, once you know the principle, you can do lots of different styles to suit you. So that's what's great about pattern cutting. One method, and then it really works for you. Well, if you made it really small, it would be quite a cute detail, wouldn't it, on a floral dress?
Yeah, so obviously this frill is really huge, but there's a couple of examples on our Pinterest board as well of really little frills where they're probably only 4 or 5 centimeters big, and there's lots of them in the skirt. It's that very like 90s look of that slip dress, but
Really?
with those little frills added through from kind of like the knee downwards. And actually going back to what you were saying about the more vintage kind of look, there's another image on our Pinterest board, which is basically a skirt, and it's got this kind of frill, but then at the waist, the frill goes up and creates a bow. And I just think it's a really nice, clever bit of plain cutting.
Hello, Jen. Yeah, and I think and also we had a t-shirt with the same sort of circular frill. So I think it's where you can really think how it suits you and how you blow it up, and also fabric choices. And as Kate said, controlling that frill will make all the difference between occasion wear and office wear. So it can be suitable for everything. I was thinking I would love people to take a guess who picked what on our Pinterest board. You can comment in our Pinterest board and say, is it Charlotte or Kate?
Yes, do. I want to. I feel like people will be able to guess. Okay, do you want to talk us through our third design?
Yes. So we're actually quite restrained. We only had 3 today, so we can actually concentrate on it. So when Kate mentioned circular, straight away I thought Holston, and I'm a really big fan of classic Holston, and his stuff, of course, is very 1970s New York glamour, Studio 54. But he was a fantastic draper for Kate, but he also was a really good pattern cutter, and he used a lot of geometrics. So he actually, if you have a look at it, he did lots of pure circle. So like sticking circles together, making dresses out of circles in unusual ways. But one of my favorite ones ever, and there's a fantastic book about Holston, which has some of the patterns, which is always helpful, is this one. And there's lots of different versions, like white versions, purple, and this is a silk, but I've also seen an organza, and organza looks really amazing. But what it basically means, it's the same sort of it's a hybrid of the last two, because it's both a horizontal and a vertical frill, because up here you start basically with a shawl collar, which becomes a circle, and then you have a dolman sleeve, and that circle basically comes out the whole top. So rather than having a straight seam here, you have the first layer of the circle as part of your body, so it grows out, but then you sandwich in between another more extreme circle, so you get all these different amounts of volume. And actually, if you put your hands up, it's more like a horizontal frill if you stand like that, but if you put your hands down, it flows down, and depending whether you use organza or silk, I think this is a taffeta, so it's quite stiff. It really uses that circle to its most, and how you can use quite normal drafting methods like a shawl collar, but you can turn that into a circular pattern and really accentuate that and make it part of a garment rather than a frill.
That is a very clever piece of pattern cutting. I love it.
And there is earlier I said, Kate, you have to see the pattern. It's really clever, and of course we couldn't find it anywhere. But yes, it's these. If I zoom in a bit, it's these layers where you can see the shawl collar is 2 layers, and one is much more frilly than the other. And it's sort of gathered in. It's very clever how the top shoulder line as well, it's like a sort of U-shaped, and everything gets gathered together to create that look.
I love the idea of layering the frills with different amounts of volume as well. That kind of adds an extra layer of thought in there.
Yes, and it's sort of also like, because he's done like the top collar, if you look at it, that is like that has lots of frill but shorter. Then underneath is like the shawl collar, which is much bigger. But it's basically like normally with shawl collar, you really want to get the angle perfect, where it sits perfectly. He's gone exactly the opposite, where you actually accentuate it to get that sort of frilly edge we normally try to avoid. So that's where you can use like classic pattern cutting methods, and then you start thinking about geometric shaped circles rather than trying to make it fit perfectly. That's where a lot of magic happens with circles.
I feel like it's taking those like traditional pattern cutting rules, knowing them so that you know you aren't going to completely mess up the garment, but then completely turning them on their head, which is great.
Yes, no, we have lots of fun, and I will try to find that pattern at some point.
When we find it, we'll post it on our Instagram stories.
And it's what I like about it as well is where it looks a bit more organic by adding the layers. So you could even, with the last two we we shared. You could add some which are part of the pattern, some which are completely the frill. You can sort of play around and start putting them together to make it work for you. I think that's where it always gets quite interesting, where you move away from just the frill and you actually use some of your pattern cutting methods to make it work.
And I like the fabric choice in this one because, like you said, it's a taffeta. It's a little bit more stiff, has a bit more body to it. It doesn't kind of droop and flounce in the same way as the others. It creates more of a 3D effect. And I think the silhouette of that garment is so beautiful.
Yeah, it's sort of it's very Holston. I made it just as a sort of experiment before, and it's when you put it on, you can see it's from a time, and it doesn't actually suit me at all. But you can appreciate how clever it is.
Yeah.
But again, rather than having it on your shoulder seam, I actually think the collar itself would be quite nice, just having that with a normal jacket, or again adding it to different parts of your body, isn't it? If you created these slash lines on a pair of trousers or something, that'd be really interesting on a dress.
Yeah, or even trying it in a different fabric, so it's less 3D, more drapey.
Yeah, and a wool, like a drapey wool, would be really nice, and making it smaller, isn't it?
Yeah, or even doing like a blouse version of it in something like a Georgette, maybe.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's sort of one of those things. I think that Kate is always because you do so much with the occasion that you really get to understand like just really subtle fabric choices and how it can make a real difference.
And don't forget, guys, if you want to hear more about fabric choices and more about what fabrics work best for these sorts of frills, session number 3 of this month is all about construction. So that's where we cover the sewing, the fabrics, the inner construction, all of that kind of stuff.
Yes, how to make it vintage Martha, or how to bring up the high occasion stuff. And sorry, I've got the paper because I've actually got paper versions of all the stuff on my computer. So try to find it. While I try to find the Holston pattern, do feel free to ask us any questions about construction, stuff like that. Oh, I'm going to show you some. This is not an hour. I'm going to just now completely surprise Kate. But can you see these are the Holston? He called them UFO dresses or flying saucer dresses. But again, these are actually circular frills, but they just become part of a garment. So they're very clever. Sorry, Kate.
No, I'm loving this. So yeah, if anyone's got any questions, now is your chance. Pop them in the chat, and we will do our best to answer them.
Yes. Do you like circular frills? I'd love to know. Do you have any garments with circular frills, Kate?
Not full circles.
No, actually, what I was going to say, what I love about, we've shown you quite extreme examples, but what I love about even like the first one, I like on skirts where you use like parts of the circle and you really restrain it in different volumes. So I got stuff like that. I don't do that much occasion there. I haven't got the occasions to go to. And I get you pattern cut a little bit, but you do?
Yeah, I've done a lot of circular frills, but I don't know that I own any full circular frills.
Actually, I've got some nice blouses, some vintage blouses. I will have to hunt them out again, which have that sort of more day there. Oh, look, here's how it actually looks from the side. The Holston we're talking about. Can you see the volumes there are? And I think look from the back, you can see because it grows out of the bodice.
Oh yeah.
So it's like I'm nearly at the I'm hoping to come across the pattern in a second.
Okay, while Charlotte is looking through that, I'm just going to remind you guys what exactly Drafting Diaries is. So we start the month with this live chat here on YouTube talking about the topic, right? And looking at a couple of different designs, just like we have today. Then next week, we are doing a live drafting tutorial. And that's when we pick one of the designs that we've talked about in this session, and we show you how to draft it step by step. Then session 3, which happens in 2 weeks, is our construction session. And like I mentioned, that is where we talk about the sewing, things that you need to consider when you're making your pattern, things like finishings, fabrics, all those kinds of things. And those construction sessions are really in depth. We cover a lot in them. And there isn't much out there that covers that kind of stuff. So if you are interested in learning those little professional tricks, all the things that we would consider before we start actually making the pattern and while we're sewing it, and even after we've sewn it, when we're fitting it, do come along to that session. They are really fun. So
And they put the link in the description, Kate, for people.
yeah, link is in the description. You can sign up for them. If you sign up for the sessions individually, they are £10 each. If you sign up for them both together, it's £17.
And
sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I always find the constructions, because I think pattern cutting, we have quite different approaches. So it's always interesting to see how we are talking about the last one we did, the coronation cape, how we would have done, I've done things completely different, but we get the same outcome. But I think construction is always really fascinating because there's so many different ways of doing it, and depending on which companies you work for, you have like specific ways. So it's always really fascinating listening to you. So I really enjoy those sessions.
Yeah, I always think pattern cutting is less about the journey and more about the destination, because every pattern cutter has their own way to do things. We all develop little tweaks and little individual little quirks that we like to use when we're away. So most of the time, it doesn't matter how you get there as long as you get there.
And yeah, and also you always learn, like, but sometimes you discover new methods, isn't it? Like, because we all taught something to begin with, and then you adapt it, but then suddenly after years you find something completely different, and you say, "Oh, I hadn't seen that again. It works actually really well."
Yeah, like the bias spiral dress that you did. There was something in there that I was like, oh, I hadn't thought about doing it that way. That's great.
So yeah, sort of. I think we quite like we all have pattern cutting books, but it's always quite nice sharing those methods, which are sort of kept in universities and studios rather than shared more widely. So yes, and I still can't find the Holston, I'm afraid. I will keep on hunting. But I will show you one last one, which is, again, it's this look at this horizontal. But it's like, again, a short collar frill.
Oh, that is nice.
Yes. So I have it somewhere on my computer. If I find it, I'll put it on Pinterest or Instagram. Who else has hordes of random? But that actually comes in handy, doesn't it? Because Pinterest boards, they become too big, I think, after a while. So you have to it's nice to go through paper.
Yeah, something I like drawing on top of photocopies as well, like writing notes or something. And a lot of my pattern cutting books were gifts from people, and they have their notes in them, which I really love.
Oh, it's really, I actually, it's like sometimes when you buy them secondhand, you find little patterns in them.
Yeah,
it's really sweet, isn't it? I really like those sort of things. Like, it's like a history, isn't it? You're like somebody's life. Yeah, and actually that sort of this Frills draw. Actually, you got, because Kate is teaching this month. Because she got 2 in a row. And that's actually, I'm expecting you might be doing a little bit of that to work out the frills, wouldn't you? Like drawing on top of your design.
Yeah, for sure. And there'll be a little bit of some circle maths involved there as well. Just for a heads up, the design that we're going to do is the white blouse with the one shoulder frill going horizontally across the body. We'll be talking about a little bit of contouring, how we can do our one shoulder, and of course we can add that frill on there as well.
Yeah, and I think the reason we chose is we've done quite a lot of, like, the cape was quite big and glamorous, and the spiral dress was very big as well. So we wanted to choose something which you can make very glamorous, but you're also learning about contouring, because I know that's always really interesting to people. So Kate is very good at it. Just love it. So she's going to talk about, first of all, like, to contour. This is like such a bad photo, but it's basically a really fitted undergarment. So Kate is going to talk all about how to actually make that top stay up, and then how to actually control the volume so it suits you. So that'd be really interesting. And also to sort of different, it's like a geometric over the top pattern cutting, and then it's sort of being very precise with your contouring. So it's quite nice, balanced lesson, something for everybody. And then of course you can make anything with that method.
Exactly. All right, so last call for any questions or anything, any comments on circle frills, anything you want to share with us, guys?
No, we see that I will try to find the Holston this week, and then do sign up. We're gonna put it on our Instagram as well, aren't we? So people can join us, and it's basically next Tuesday 8 p.m. and then the Tuesday after, and they're just on Zoom, and you can either be on camera or off, and they're quite nice, chatty. They're not like serious sessions, they're informative, but
it's like this, but with some drafting added in.
Yes, yeah.
Like everyone knows how chatty we are by now, so it's basically just us chatting and drafting. Quite nice. Brilliant. Nice. You learn some pattern cutting.
Yeah, and it's because it's small. We always sort of have like sometimes depending on how many people come. You don't have to make it live. You get a recording, by the way. But sometimes we have like 8 people. Sometimes we only have 5, and it's just really nice. And it's quite a nice intimate setting. I quite like sort of getting, because this is sort of like we're talking to each other, and I can see 11 of you watching. But I quite like the Zoom sessions, a bit more intimate.
Yeah,
nearly like real life.
Pretty much like real life, just
be at home.
Face to face. Yeah,
yeah. Because very often you like sort of, because I know Kate has been in the studio all day, probably like, and yeah, so you sometimes do in your pajamas or anything, you just dress up at the top. But today we both dressed up. We're full dressed as well.
All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. That is it from us, and we will see you next week for the drafting session. Remember, you can sign up in the link that is in the description.
Yes. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. Bye-bye.